sector. Previous roles include Deloitte Risk Advisory lead partner for the energy and resource industry and managing partner for Northern Territory. Hendri will talk about the current state of South Australian economy. And Florian, are you here? Yes? He's going to talk about the uni merger also a little bit, so be kind on him. Hendri is a wonderful advocate for university-industry partnership, and he's the one who is one of the spearheads or one of the main persons for setting up a Deloitte Academy by Deloitte, which is a partnership between University of Adelaide and Deloitte. And I happen to be the director of that academy, and that's how I know Hendri. Thank you, Hendri. All yours.
So I'll need to take that out because I pace when I'm nervous. They'll ask why I'm nervous is as we were walking up, Rajiv said to me, you know that I am now the district governor? I said, yes. He said, and I invited you. I said, yes. He said, don't be a disappointment. But then he goes further. And he walks me around the room and introduces me to all these magnificent people that have done and is doing fantastic things. And I'm thinking, what am I going to tell you that you don't know? So please bear with me. I'll try not to put everybody to sleep by talking about the economy. And look, everybody asked the question, where are we going? So this is a presentation from our Axis Economics colleagues. You'll see there's a lot of words on there. I'll paraphrase some of that. Normally when we get to our partners conference, the Axis Economic partner will always walk up and tell us, look at my forecast, and then look at what happened last year. And we'll say, yes. And he would say, it looks the same as last year. I said, yes. I said, because I was right. Now, they're obviously very, very convinced in their own abilities. I'm not always sure. Reality is what we've got at the moment, and we call this presentation Productivity Promise in terms of what needs to happen and what we hope is going to happen in our economy going forward. But we are in a stage of profound change. And it's profound change in the global economy. And I think as everybody in the room would know, we do have a very different USA at the moment. But apart from that, the world economy is changing as well. So we do have the fact that the US previously had the world reserve currency was an incredibly powerful position. That is being eroded. But on top of that, we have a number of changes that is happening in the global economy. And the net result of that is, if you look at it from an Australian perspective, what we've relied on for our economic growth in the past is simply not going to be true going forward. We are going to have to do more from our own perspective to make sure that we continue with an uninterrupted economic growth. Now, the one really positive thing that we've seen out of the federal government is the conversation about productivity and the Treasurer talking about productivity. And that is absolutely crucial for us to change the trajectory of where our economy is at the moment. So the million-dollar question, what does the global economy look like? And reality is it is gloomy. It is not where we would like to see it to be. We obviously have the Trump factor and the fact that we've got tariffs and bouncing up and down in terms of what that is going to be. That is going to have an impact. And the biggest impact is that we're seeing that the entire globalism that we've created over a long period of time and that has supported global economic growth is unraveling at the moment. How far that will go, we don't know. But I say the only good thing about tariffs is that we don't have too many of them in Australia at the moment. There's just nothing good to say about them. If you think about even the war that we still have in Europe around Russia and Ukraine, that plus the wars in the Middle East has got an impact on oil prices. Now, again, the positive side is oil prices have not got the impact that they had 20, 30 years ago. Global oil consumption, as relative to the size of the economy, is much smaller than what it was. So it's got less of an impact, but it still has an impact. And that can result in inflationary pressures. Now, what that basically means is if you look at the bottom of the chart, real economic growth is pretty insipid across most of our trading partners. The US did pretty well in 2024. We expect that will come down, and that's basically part of what you could only call self-harm at the moment. Eurozone is not looking great. Japan has not been looking great for a long time. China, it's difficult to believe all the numbers that come out of China, but it still looks as if there will be a decent amount of growth. And then India is doing particularly well. Now, What that means for Australia is really interesting. And the best way to describe it is we think we will grind out some growth over the next year. So we do see a slow improvement still happening. It's very fragile. And look, anything can go wrong around that. But we do see interest rates come down. Real wages are still rising. We have got very low unemployment. We've got a mass amount of government expenditure at the moment, which is supporting the economy. So we believe that there will still be a level of growth. It's not going to be fantastic, but it will be there. Now, if we look at what supports that growth, if we think about business investment, and this is probably the weakest part of our economy at the moment, we're simply not seeing business investment pick up. It is at incredibly low levels, and that's got a direct impact on productivity. I'll get back to the productivity question, but productivity is what will create sustainable economic growth for Australia. Nothing else can do that. Business investment is simply not where it needs to be. If we look at dwelling investment, private dwelling investment, we hope that that will start to pick up in 2026 as profitability in the building industry improves. But those two factors are still very, very weak. So biggest concern we've got is all about business investment. And obviously the global volatility does not help confidence. And we need confidence for business investment to improve. If we look at population growth and unemployment, we do see population growth coming down substantially. We've had, and you would see in 2024, a big spike. Now, it ran a lot of political headlines, but fundamentally, we were catching up for a big slump in population growth that we had during the COVID period. So if you look at it over a 5-year period, it's probably not that exceptional. We see that coming back to trend over the long term. If you look at the numbers at the bottom left, we expect about 330,000 people in 2024-25, and then 260,000 and stabilizing from there go forward. A lot of that is temporary visa holders, so everybody is not permanent residents that move in. Students is a component of that. And before I even get to university, students does not cause housing shortages, to be clear. That's a fallacy. That's a political statement. It's something that we absolutely need in our economy. That's just a side point. Now, if you look at our employment rates, unemployment rate, at the moment we are doing exceptionally well around that, and there is imbalances in our in the capacity that we've got in our economy. Those imbalances are mainly caused by the fact that we've got such mass investment from a government perspective. So what we are seeing is most employment is created in the public sector, and it's not necessarily created in the most productive part of the economy. So it's fantastic that we do have almost full employment, but we're not necessarily getting that employment through investment in productive parts of the economy, which is not so great. Now, if we look at where we believe we would go to, we can see that there will be a slight easing in that. We would see unemployment tick up a little bit. We think about 4.4% by the end of 2025. But again, to put that in context, a few years back, 5% was seen as full employment in the country. So we're still doing exceptionally well. The bigger challenge is more, what are we doing with people? Are they actually being productive? Are we investing to make our employed people as productive as possible? Now, again, million-dollar question, where do we see interest rates going? The key thing is we believe that inflation will broadly stay, and the next slide talks to that, broadly stay within the RBA's bands. So what we actually think is we will see a gradual easing of interest rates over the next year. The focus has very definitively changed from containing inflation to actually supporting growth in the economy, and very much needed at the moment. Inflation, as we say, we expect that will stay within the bands. Now, you will see that bouncing around. We've got a lot of subsidies at the moment from federal government and state government, specifically around energy. So we believe that you will see spikes in that. I think in the number we called up a 16.3% rise in prices in the March quarter. All of that was due to the subsidies coming off. And that will continue to happen as we go forward. But broadly, we expect that it will stabilize between that 2 and 3%, which is great for the economy and again supports the case for the interest rate cuts that we've got. Now, wage growth is an interesting one, and as I said earlier, we do have a very constrained labour market, which obviously supported some of the wage growth that we've got. We see that easing as we go forward, just simply because there is going to be more capacity in the economy. Still tight, but there will be more capacity, and therefore we don't believe that will continue to be supported. Now, And that's the end of the boring slides that I've got. Just to get back to it, the most important thing that we can do at the moment for the economy of Australia is to drive productivity. If we don't drive productivity, we cannot have economic growth in the long term. It's simply not possible. At the moment, a lot of the economic growth we get, to be frank, we're putting on the federal credit card and state government credit cards, and that is what's supporting the economic growth of Australia. The biggest challenge is productivity is not just flatlined, it's actually come back over the last few years. And until we reverse that trend, we're simply never going to be in a position where we've got sustainable economic growth in the country. And we used to have a really good average of between 2 to 3% productivity growth on a year-on-year basis. That's not happening at the moment. So that's something that seriously needs to change. And the only way we can see that changing is if we get that business investment in the equipment that our workers use, and then the other important thing is education. As Rajiv said, I'm quite a proponent for the university sector, and not just the university sector, for all training within our country, because that's the only way we can sustainably create the productivity in our economy. Now, just linking that back to the South Australian economy, we are, and I'll first admit that I'm a little bit of a glass half full individual, we are in a better position that we've been, well, ever since I've been in Australia, and that's the last 20 years. Most people in the room is here for much longer than that. What we see in the economy at the moment is a clear vision in terms of where we are going to go, and there is mega projects, and I can only call them mega projects, that will roll out over the next 10 to 15 years in South Australia. So we actually do see the economy here strengthening sustainably over the long term. Now, is it going to be a smooth path? No, absolutely not. One of the key challenges we do have in our economy is actually capacity constraints. We don't have enough people. On top of that, we don't have enough places to put more people. So the challenge is we've got a housing issue, hence the reason why our property prices suddenly exploded. That needs to be resolved. But we need more people in South Australia to be able to support the economic growth that we see coming and to support the projects that we see coming down the track. Again, we are in a lucky position that those projects are mostly government funded, federally funded, and all of that will come into the South Australian economy, with the one notable exception, and that's the BHP investments that's happening at the moment around copper, which is also a long-term investment. So we're not talking about something a simple flash in the pan. We're talking about for 50-year programs, whether it's BHP, whether it's defense. It's mega programs that will run over the long term. So very positive around our economy. Now, the chief asked me to just make a few comments around the university merger. And this is my personal points of view, Rajiv. Do I think it's a good thing? I think it's a spectacular thing for the state. And I'm not saying that just because we're involved in the merger. The reality is, if we look at sustainably strong universities in Australia, we need scale. That is absolutely table stakes. The funding that we do from a government perspective, and it's federally funded, into higher education is simply not enough to maintain the quality of universities, the quality of research that you would like to see. So the way we do that is through international students, which is a very, very, very large part of the whole Australian economy and the South Australian economy. Now, to attract those international students, you have to have top-class universities. To have a top-class university, you need international students. A wicked circle that we're in there. And what we need to do is we need to make sure that we create a competitive university, and we can only do that through scale. So the only other way to do it is to step away from some of the social responsibility that universities strongly support, and that's not the right outcome for the broader community. So that's the key reason for having that university. The other part, when we talk about productivity, is the modernization that is possible through the merger of curriculum, of what's been taught, is going to provide us with the workers for the future that we're creating in South Australia. So it's a key part of our economic story. The economic growth in South Australia cannot happen if we do not manage to create that, I would call it, exceptional institution that can support what we need in our economy go forward. So it's not just about making sure, it's not just about scale. It's about scale with a purpose. And the purpose is the quality of education, and it's how that supports our economy going forward. Now, we've been working, and I've been working for Rajiv, I think it's 4 or 5 years now, as part of the academy that we've got in the business school. And But that was before we worked with the university as part of the merger. And there is such capacity and such smart people in universities. It's an absolute crying shame that we don't make better use of the capacity that sits in university for research, for commercialization, and that we don't have a closer link between business and university. So that needs to be a key focus of what we do go forward. And it is a key focus for definitely Adelaide University, and I believe all universities. That again is how we drive productivity in our economy going forward. The US does that exceptionally well. Now with their new president, I'm not so sure how exceptionally well that will go going forward, but time will tell. Reality around it is we need that educational institution, we need the research institution, and we need it to be a world-class institution. So that's what we're aiming for. A lot of people ask me how the merger is going. Look, it is hard work. There's no doubt about it. It's an astounding amount of work to be done to get the doors to be open by 1 January 2026. Will it happen? Absolutely yes. No doubt about it. I always joke with Rajiv, I say to him, look, what I've learned about academics is once the decision is made, the debate really starts. So that makes... But then I also have to say, once you get people with that intelligence and that capacity to move and do things, the results is just amazing to watch. It is absolutely incredible what can be done with the capacity that you've got in institutions, in universities. It is exceptional people doing exceptional things. So I cannot speak highly enough of the academic cohorts and the professional staff of the two universities. What they are doing is absolutely incredible. And it's a short time frame. Most of them have got 2 jobs at the moment, one for the old institution, one for the new institution, and that will only really take over next year. But what will be created is going to be exceptional. Rajiv, that's all I've got to say. I hope I wasn't too big a disappointment. Thank you so much, everybody.
Jeff first and then Mark.
Short question. Thank you very much for your presentation today. Just on the productivity thing, how much will artificial intelligence and AI and all that sort of stuff, how much will that feed into an improvement in productivity? Like, can we just sit back and let AI do it for us, or is it a bit of blue sky thinking?
Look, it's a question we're all grappling with, and nobody more so than, our profession this is probably our Kodak moment. If we don't embrace artificial intelligence, that'll be our Kodak moment. We will not exist in a few years' time. Now, the answer is it going to be a productivity enhancing tool? It already is, absolutely, no doubt about it. We've actually gone, and within Deloitte, we've made an internal artificial intelligence tool available to absolutely all our staff. And the entire idea is to get them to engage with it as much as possible. Now, our staff cohorts are very young. They engage almost immediately with it. The older ones of us, that's the 50-plussers, those are the ones that really struggle to get into it. But what we do see is we're in the absolute peak of the hype cycle at the moment. Everybody thinks this is going to be world-changing, and it probably is, but it's going to take more time, and it needs more time to mature. The pace at which it's maturing, though, is absolutely astounding. It is the fastest I've ever seen something happen. So yes, we're in a hype cycle. Yes, it needs to develop further, but it is absolutely amazing what's being done. Can you simply trust an AI to do everything at the moment? No, you can't. It's not at that level yet. Will it keep on improving? Absolutely it will. Will it have a big impact on productivity? It all depends on how well we embrace it. I would suggest that if we don't embrace it as a country, we will probably be left behind. So it is a very, very important tool to embrace.
Thanks very much for a very insightful presentation. GDP and GDP growth has been a global fascination for economic success in every country around the world. Isn't it time that we actually focus on other things such as sustainability and resilience?
I think it's not an either-or, Margaret. I would say it's a both, and absolutely agree with you. It's fascinating, and they don't necessarily need to be mutually exclusive. Sustainability is an absolute focus at the moment. And if you look at long-term economic growth, if you don't do it sustainably, whatever your definition of sustainability is, you will not be successful. So I personally don't think it's an either-or. As a proxy for living standards, GDP is still the best measure we've got at the moment. There is attempts to actually enhance that by also showing what does that mean from a social perspective. Because you can have incredibly high GDP growth, but the distribution is completely skewed, which is not a great outcome at all. The fascinating thing is there's a way to measure that. As a country, we're actually not too bad in that. In terms of, and look, we live in absolute privilege. Let's be clear about that. Everybody in Australia lives in absolute privilege in terms of comparatively to the rest of the world. So our distributions are reasonably good, and I say reasonably, nothing is ever perfect, but not mutually exclusive, if that makes sense.
Yep. Sorry. Yeah, no, they always try to get me to comment because I'm actually working at the university. So, and I want to keep my job, so I'm probably not going to talk too much about how it's going at the moment. No, it's more a question about the scale argument. I mean, basically let me phrase it this way, the university has not actually articulated at any point why we're doing this. Like the staff constantly is asking and we're never really getting an answer why we're actually doing this. And that is pretty much, I mean, what we believe is actually the reason is like, well, we get more international students. Well, the question A is, will we really get more international students given the federal government's point? And the question is like, what kind of mechanism is it? Why would we get more international students if we merge the two institutions? Actually, that's probably my question, is like the question of like scale versus product differentiation. Beforehand, we had two distinct institutions. One was clearly a classical research institution with a very strong academic focus. One was a locally oriented, kind of professionally oriented, if I may kind of frame it, as like you have a lot more degrees that focus on very specific job occupations. Like there was research, but in some areas, but in other areas, there's not that much focus on research kind of thing. Now, what do you do, and that also is reflected in the education, in the degrees, in what the degrees focus on. Now what happened is that we basically have to merge the degrees, and now we basically have to find a compromise between the two. Which then is the question, is like can we actually maintain the quality of the degrees on one side, the academic quality, and can we keep the focus on the professions on the other side? And so by essentially, I mean, it's probably a problem of the speed with which the thing has to have happened. There's no differentiation there. So basically right now we're compromising. And I don't see how, given that we're compromising, we can actually achieve scale because we are losing the top, because they're just saying like, why should I go to a second-rate university now rather than going to the top-rate academic universities in this country? And we're losing the bottom where basically like, well, we have to raise the standards somewhat, so they don't really find a place at the university anymore. So how do we actually maintain scale when we're going to lose the size through the missing product differentiation?
Look, I would not dare to try and answer that question because that's probably for the Vice-Chancellors, to be brutally honest there. I'd probably look at it from a little bit of a broader perspective. And through scale and through capacity, we can address both of the spheres that you've described there. Again, I'm a very glass-half-full person. I believe with the capacity that we've got in the two universities, I am sure that we can find the solution to exactly the problems we've got there. I just have faith in everybody I meet in the universities. They are so smart. They are so accomplished. I cannot see them not being able to solve that problem. But I'm not going to answer the rest of the question. That's for the Vice-Chancellors to do.
Thank you for... I come from a defence research and also an academic background, so having taught a lot of these overseas students myself over the years, I see that the quality outcome is what they're seeking. On the topic of the outcomes and productivity, you really need to have a good product to focus on, so that you've got some metrics to gain, to measure things. And there are, at Flinders, for example, they've got the Factory of the Future, which is coming up out of the ground, is now, going. And it's an attempt to bring industry and academia and defence together to answer questions that the community and industries have. the key there is to foster communication and conversation across the sectors. How well do you think that we're doing that with the objective of finding the correct products so that we can raise that productivity for the nation?
Just my honest view on that is not very well. But that's not necessarily the universities that's not doing every attempt to do that. I think business is not engaging strongly enough with academia at the moment, would be my personal view. And so we have a very, very small snapshot. We've engaged with the university, and what we are getting out of that, I believe, is quite incredible. Whether it's from the business school, whether it's from the School of Engineering, we're getting a lot of benefit out of it, and I believe the students are getting a lot of benefit from that as well. So when we stepped through what will the academy look like, one of the key things was what's in it for the student. What's enhanced in their experience if we create this? And that's where the productivity question comes in as well. If we enhance the experience for the student, we would instantly get that productivity uplift. Now, if you take it to research, that's why I think we just simply do not partner well enough across private sector and universities. And I think that needs to be much better than what it is at the moment. But I wouldn't lay that at the feet of universities. I think that's equally a responsibility for the business community.
Thank you and congratulations on one of the most difficult topics in South Australia. I've had some involvement in universities over time. One of the things that I'm a bit surprised about is the promotion of the Adelaide University into the wonderful change in what's gone on in universities is less face-to-face and far more online work. And most of us who have got grandchildren would know that most of them don't attend university physically terribly much, which I find is a great sad thing, but that's a personal thing. The issue then comes back to what was being talked about, that the federal government has made it very clear we need fewer international students, which is given that they pushed the various governments pushed the universities into more international students because financially that was a great benefit to them. Now we have completely the opposite, coupled with the fact that we are promoting online learning. Why would someone in Hong Kong or Singapore have to come to Adelaide to go to university when they can do it online?
Jeff, and that is not $1 million question. It's actually a relatively simple answer to that. And what the university is striving to do at the moment is it has to be meaningful engagement. So when we have students in the classroom, what does meaningful engagement look like? Now, in all fairness, that's not just a problem for universities. If I look at our staff cohort, in Adelaide, we actually have great attendance in our office. When I say great attendance, I get 50% of staff into my office at the moment. Literally. And that is the best in the entire country. Go to a place like Melbourne, you'll be lucky to get 10% of staff in the office. To the point where we will have to mandate people to be in an office. That's the reality. Because what we see through that is we are actually dropping productivity. Now, again, a personal view, but it's absolute rubbish that people are as productive when they're sitting on a beach as when they are when they're with their teams in office. I can say that definitively. I've disagreed with our talent partners vehemently on that point. So if we take that back to the universities, it is what is that meaningful engagement? How do we make it worth people starting to be in that classroom? How do you create a connection with other students? That is what they're looking for. I had an interesting conversation with a Vice-Chancellor from WA the other day, and she said to me, look, a few years back, we decided to give students the option to go on to online learning, and the classrooms were suddenly empty. But they were on campus. They were just sitting in lounge chairs and on beanbags outside looking at their laptops in the sun. Again, we have to make it meaningful. If you can make it meaningful, they will still come. Our universities have got an exceptionally good reputation overseas. Yes, there's a lot of marketing involved in that, a lot of work to maintain that. Did we do ourselves a favor through the political aspect that came around that? Absolutely not. The only thing that saved us is that Canada, the US, and Europe has done worse than what we did in terms of making ourselves unattractive. So that's probably helpful at the moment. But it's, again, I'm hoping, and I'm seriously hoping that will prove to be true, Now that we're through the election cycle, all of that will simply quiet down. And we will not have that. And as housing supply improves, which has got nothing to do with international students, it's got everything to do with regulation, it's got everything to do with challenges of actually getting houses built and lack of capacity to build houses. As we start solving the real problem, I think that will disappear as a political issue. I'm hoping so.
Thanks, Henry. That's been a wonderful insight into the future of our country. In universities, I have some experience and was involved in a failed merger 30 years ago. The University of Adelaide acquired Roseworthy and the Adelaide Teachers College. That was all that happened. The government said it's up to the partners to negotiate whatever they can. But this time, the government has actually mandated it will happen. So it will happen. The legislation is in place. My question is, and I strongly support it, I think the challenge is that we have an opportunity to redefine the curriculum and update it. We bring people who have been locked into the past and the way subjects were taught and lecture notes that maybe are a bit stale. But this will actually cause people to concentrate on the future. And at the end of the day, university is about creativity and innovation. And if we don't get that right, we won't have the productivity you're looking for. And companies have a big place to play in this, because the intelligence is not just in universities, it's in companies, and brightest people like yourself are in companies. And we need more internships. We've done it in schools, we've done it in hospitals. It's time to actually manage more placements in companies so that we know where companies strategically want to go to. And as we all know, you learn more in your first 2 years out of university in your company than you've ever learned about business in the university. So, do you like to comment?
Absolutely right, Frank. And it's fascinating, yes, and internships is critical. Again, it's the partnership between business and universities that is so important. It's interesting, we've got a new employment commissioner, Cameron, and what he's been doing around the skills in South Australia and how he's setting it up, I thought is quite extraordinary. For instance, we now have apprenticeship degrees in defence taught in UniSA while people are working, and they've got guaranteed work at BAE if they get into the program. We've got the new trade schools, which basically guarantees those young people a position in defence. So I think there's a lot of thought going into it, and I sat down with Cameron a few days ago and he stepped me through what he's been doing and what they've achieved, and I was so impressed by it. The point that he did make to me is it's easier to get that done in a smaller jurisdiction like South Australia than what it is in some of the larger ones. Because you go to one minister and he will simply walk around the office to the other one and they'll get a deal done and they'll get something through Parliament and they will make it happen. They will change regulation to make this possible. One of the biggest challenges that we still have at the moment is actually apprenticeships that's not finished. And that is a huge number that simply do not finish apprenticeships that go through the economy. I mean, even if you look at the most lucrative ones, in electrician or plumber, that's almost the guarantee of being a millionaire go forward. I don't know if any of you have had any work done in your house done recently. You would literally only have 60% of those apprenticeships being completed in South Australia at the moment. Again, not a South Australian problem, an economy-wide Australia problem, but something that we absolutely have to address. But I cannot agree more.